You step onto the cobblestones of Paris. The year is 1900. Gas lamps flicker, casting long shadows down elegant boulevards. Carriages clatter, their wheels echoing a rhythm of opulence and endless possibility. You are surrounded by the Belle Époque, an era of breathtaking beauty, artistic explosion and societal flourish. But beneath the silk and lace, behind the grand facades of sprawling mansions, a different story unfolds. One not of glittering soirees and champagne toasts, but of shadows and whispers. You might catch a fleeting glimpse of a heavily veiled lady hurrying into a discreet chemist's shop, or notice the distant hollow cough from a velvet-draped drawing room. This glittering age, so devoted to pleasure and display, harbored a secret world. A world where the most privileged, the aristocrats, found themselves ensnared by invisible chains, seeking solace and escape in the intoxicating embrace of powerful, often deadly substances. Join us as we pull back the curtain on their hidden lives. You have stepped across the threshold, leaving the gaslit boulevards behind, and now find yourself within the innermost sanctum of Belle Époque society. The air here is thick with the scent of lilies and expensive tobacco, a testament to lives lived in extraordinary luxury. Imagine the hushed grandeur of a private salon, walls adorned with heavy damask, gilded mirrors reflecting the soft glow of a crystal chandelier, and deep velvet armchairs inviting repose. Here, among the aristocracy, life appears as a meticulously choreographed ballet of pleasure and protocol. This is a world where immense inherited wealth flows like an endless river. Your days, were you one of these privileged few, would be structured around rituals of refinement. Mornings might begin with a delicate breakfast served in a sun-drenched conservatory, followed by a leisurely stroll through a manicured garden or a fitting for the latest fashion from Worth or Doucet. Afternoons could bring social calls, a private concert, or perhaps a drive in a horseless carriage, still a marvel of modern invention, through the Bois de Boulogne. Evenings, of course, are for the grand spectacles. Opera galas, glittering balls hosted in cavernous reception halls, or intimate dinners where champagne flows freely and conversation sparkles like the diamonds adorning every wrist and neckline. You are surrounded by beauty, by art, by every conceivable comfort and convenience. Servants anticipate your every whim, from drawing your bath to selecting your attire. The world outside, with its struggles and its grime, seems impossibly distant, a mere whisper beyond these thick, insulated walls. This is the pinnacle of human achievement, a golden age of seemingly boundless joy and progress. Yet, as you listen closely, you might detect a faint, almost imperceptible discord beneath the polished surface. A sigh too deep, a laugh too brittle, an unnatural flicker in the eyes of a lady draped in pearls. For this life, for all its dazzling allure, was for many a gilded cage. A prison of expectation, of stifling routine, and of profound existential ennui. Consider the young countess, whose marriage was arranged for dynastic convenience rather than love. Her days are a parade of social obligations, her evenings a series of empty compliments. She has no profession, no real purpose beyond maintaining appearances and perhaps producing an heir. Or think of the aging duke, his wealth assured, his legacy secured, yet haunted by a creeping sense of irrelevance, his body aching from years of extravagant living. For them, and for so many others in their rarefied strata, boredom was a pervasive and insidious disease. A relentless dull ache that no amount of parties, jewels, or fawning admirers could truly alleviate. Belle Époque, in its relentless pursuit of pleasure, inadvertently cultivated an environment ripe for escape. When genuine passion or purpose proved elusive, the mind naturally sought other avenues. And in this era, the avenues were surprisingly numerous and alarmingly accessible. You see, the medical and scientific understanding of addiction was, by modern standards, woefully primitive. Many substances that we now know to be profoundly dangerous were then openly sold, enthusiastically prescribed by doctors, and often considered harmless tonics or even fashionable elixirs. The chemist's shop, That discreet establishment you saw the veiled lady hurrying into, was not just a purveyor of simple remedies. It was a gateway to a world of potent possibilities. Walk with me into one of these apothecaries. The air is redolent with strange and exotic scents. Dried herbs, tinctures in amber bottles, the faint, sweet smell of something akin to caramel. On polished wooden shelves, alongside bottles of cough syrup and digestive aids, you would find vials of powerful opiates, neatly labeled. Laudanum, a potent blend of opium and alcohol, was a common household staple, used for everything from menstrual cramps to sleeplessness, from teething babies to melancholic wives. It was as ubiquitous as aspirin is today, and often seen as no more harmful. Imagine yourself a society lady suffering from a nervous complaint, a vague diagnosis that encompassed everything from anxiety to mild depression. Your doctor, a man of science and repute, might confidently prescribe a spoonful of laudanum each evening to calm your agitated nerves and ensure a restful sleep. The initial effect is a blissful tranquility, a soothing warmth that washes over your weary mind. The world's pressures recede, replaced by a gentle, dreamlike haze. You feel understood, cared for, and temporarily free. The doctor means well, of course. He believes he is offering a genuine remedy. He cannot foresee the insidious grip that will slowly tighten around you. But the appeal of these substances extended far beyond mere medicinal relief. For some, they offered a thrilling, illicit intellectual adventure, a key to unlocking hidden artistic visions or profound philosophical insights. Cocaine, newly isolated and touted as a miracle drug, was particularly fashionable among certain avant-garde circles. It promised heightened alertness, boundless energy, and an invigorating surge of confidence. Picture a gathering in a bohemian artist studio, a space less opulent than the grand salons perhaps, but still frequented by aristocratic patrons and their adventurous offspring. Amidst lively discussion and clouds of cigarette smoke, a tiny silver spoon might make its rounds, offering a crystalline white powder. A quick sniff, and suddenly the conversation sharpens, ideas flow with dazzling rapidity, and the mundane world recedes into a vibrant, exhilarating kaleidoscope. The belief was that this was a stimulant, an enhancer, a tool for genius, not a destroyer of lives. Eminent thinkers and writers of the day openly experimented with it, describing its intoxicating effects in glowing terms. For those trapped in the rigid conventions of aristocratic life, this was an exhilarating rebellion, a taste of freedom. Then there was morphine, opium's refined cousin. Less overtly exotic than raw opium, more discreet than laudanum, morphine could be administered via a hypodermic needle. This method allowed for a precise, rapid delivery of its potent analgesic and euphoric effects. Its use became tragically widespread following the American Civil War and the Franco-Prussian War, earning it the heartbreaking moniker of the soldier's disease, as countless veterans returned home dependent on the pain relief they had received for their wounds. But its use was by no means confined to soldiers. You might encounter a morphine habit in the most unexpected of places, a quiet, elegant lady of the upper echelons, seemingly untouched by the world's sorrows. Perhaps she suffers from chronic migraines, or a debilitating female complaint that no other remedy seems to touch. Her discreet physician, ever eager to alleviate suffering, provides her with a small, elegant leather case containing a syringe and vials of the precious liquid. The act itself becomes a ritual, a private moment of escape. The initial prick of the needle is fleeting, immediately followed by a wave of profound calm, a release from all physical and emotional discomfort. In a world where emotional displays were frowned upon, where stoicism was a virtue, morphine offered a silent, solitary solace. It was her secret, her comfort, her gilded refuge from a life that demanded constant performance. Heroin, introduced later in the Belle Époque, initially hailed as a non-addictive substitute for morphine and an effective cough suppressant, compounded the problem. The irony is stark and tragic. Doctors, with the best intentions, prescribed it, believing they were offering a safer alternative, only to unwittingly usher patients into an even more potent form of dependence. The allure of these substances for the aristocracy was multifaceted. For some, it was indeed the pursuit of pleasure, an intensified experience of the senses in an age obsessed with sensory delight. For others, it was the crushing weight of expectation. To be an aristocrat meant living under a constant gaze, adhering to an intricate web of social graces and expectations. Any deviation from the prescribed path brought whispers, scandal, and potentially social ruin. These drugs offered a brief, stolen moment of authenticity, a space where the rigid mask could drop, if only for an hour. Imagine the pressure. You must always be charming, always well-dressed, always witty, always composed. You must host flawless dinners, attend endless soirees, maintain an immaculate appearance, and navigate complex social hierarchies. There is little room for genuine vulnerability, for sadness, for anger, for the messy realities of the human condition. The emotional cost of maintaining such a facade was immense. And when the mask began to crack, when anxiety gnawed, or depression settled like a heavy fog, these easily obtainable substances offered a convenient, if ultimately destructive, solution. The availability of these drugs was further amplified by the wealth of the aristocracy. Unlike the working classes who might struggle to afford such remedies, the elite could easily purchase ample supplies from any reputable chemist. They could afford the most discreet and understanding doctors, who would make private house calls and ensure their patients' secrets remained safe. The very privilege that defined their lives also facilitated their descent into addiction. The grand mansions, those symbols of power and status, became places where secrets were carefully guarded. Behind drawn velvet curtains, in plush boudoirs, or in the hushed quiet of a library filled with leather-bound volumes, individuals grappled with their hidden dependencies. The public face of the Belle Époque remained dazzling, a tapestry of shimmering silks and triumphant progress. But the private reality was often one of quiet despair, of bodies ravaged and minds ensnared. You might witness subtle signs. A lady's complexion becoming increasingly pale, her eyes often shadowed or unnaturally bright. A gentleman's temper growing erratic, his once sharp wit dulled by an underlying lethargy, or perhaps an unsettling agitation. The initial spark of euphoria would inevitably fade, replaced by the grim realities of withdrawal, the desperate need for another dose to simply feel normal, to escape the crushing pain of absence. The social fabric of the era, ironically, provided both the impetus and the concealment for these addictions. The focus on decorum meant that unpleasantries were simply not discussed in polite society. Illnesses of the mind or those related to vice were hushed up, swept under the ornate rugs of grand homes. Families would go to extraordinary lengths to protect their reputation, sending a troubled relative away to a discreet sanatorium in the countryside, often euphemistically described as a rest cure for nervous exhaustion. Indeed, consider the immense psychological toll of living a life dictated by rigid societal expectations. You are born into a position of extraordinary privilege, certainly, but also into a labyrinth of unspoken rules and conventions. Your entire existence is a performance from the moment you rise to the moment you retire. There is an expectation of constant geniality, of wit and charm, of never letting the mask slip. For women especially, their lives were often defined by their roles as wives and mothers, with little opportunity for intellectual or professional pursuits outside the domestic sphere, no matter how grand the scale of that sphere. The vibrant intellectual life that simmered just beneath the surface in Parisian cafes and salons often felt out of reach, or simply inappropriate, for an aristocratic lady. You might observe a young heiress, educated and intelligent, yet confined to endless rounds of tea parties and fitting rooms. Her spirit, perhaps, craves deeper engagement, a challenge beyond selecting the appropriate gown for the next ball. But there is no approved outlet for this yearning, no channel for her latent ambition. The weight of unfulfilled potential, coupled with the pressure to marry well and produce an heir, could be crushing. Imagine the gnawing frustration, the quiet despair that settles in the luxurious quiet of her private rooms, while downstairs her parents host another dazzling empty soiree. For such a person, a small dose of laudanum, offered initially for a persistent headache or sleeplessness, might quickly become a seductive balm, a temporary liberation from the invisible chains of her class. For men, while perhaps afforded more freedom in public life, the pressures were no less potent. The expectation to maintain family honor, to manage vast estates, often with little actual interest or aptitude for such tasks, and to engage in discreet, yet expected liaisons, could be profoundly stressful. You might see a seemingly robust count, a paragon of masculine elegance, who carries the burden of centuries of ancestral legacy. Perhaps his investments are failing, or a scandalous affair threatens to unravel his reputation. Where does such a man turn for solace? To publicly display vulnerability would be unthinkable, a sign of weakness. Instead, he might find himself increasingly drawn to the quiet, reliable comfort of a morphine injection, a fleeting oblivion from the mounting anxieties that plague his waking hours. The sheer boredom, that silent killer of the spirit, cannot be overstated as a contributing factor. When every material desire is instantly gratified, when no effort is required for survival, and when societal roles are rigidly prescribed, a profound emptiness can take root. The thrill of novelty quickly fades, leaving behind a vast expanse of sameness. For some, the extreme sensory experiences offered by certain drugs became a desperate attempt to feel something, anything, beyond the polite pleasantries and predictable rhythms of their gilded existence. Think of the way these substances permeated the very fabric of society, often subtly. You might attend a fashionable dinner party, where after the lavish meal, digestive liqueurs are served. Among them, perhaps a cordial infused with a touch of coca leaf extract, or a wine promised to lift the spirits and aid digestion, its active ingredients unknown or ignored by most. The lines between medicine, tonic, and intoxicant were blurred, making it incredibly easy to drift from casual use to dependence without ever realizing the danger. Doctors, with their limited understanding, often compounded the problem, reassuring their patients that these remedies were harmless, even beneficial. Imagine the physician, a respected figure in society, visiting his aristocratic patient. He observes the lady's pallor, her melancholic disposition, her complaints of lassitude. He sincerely wants to help. Armed with the latest pharmaceutical innovations, he prescribes morphine for her neurasthenia, or cocaine for her depressive tendencies, genuinely believing he is offering a cutting-edge cure. He does not see the future, the insidious progression from relief to craving, from comfort to torment. He sees only a temporary improvement, a grateful patient, and a demonstration of his medical prowess. This innocent complicity from the medical community was a crucial, tragic element in the Belle Époque's hidden epidemic. The secrecy surrounding these habits only deepened their hold. Unlike public drunkenness, which carried a clear social stigma, the use of laudanum, morphine, or cocaine could be conducted in the utmost privacy. A servant might be dispatched to the chemist, carrying a discreet note. A doctor might quietly administer a dose during a house call. The paraphernalia, a small, delicate syringe, a tiny silver snuff box, could be easily concealed. There were no telltale odors like stale alcohol, no slurred speech, at least not initially. The addiction could fester, unseen and unspoken, within the gilded walls of a family home for years, even decades, before it became undeniable. You might notice the subtle shift in a friend's demeanor over time. The vibrant energy slowly gives way to a listlessness, punctuated by periods of unnatural animation. The keen intellect dulls, the quick wit grows sluggish. The once sparkling eyes become cloudy, the skin takes on an unhealthy pallor, and a persistent cough might develop, dismissed as a recurring cold or seasonal ailment. These were the early hushed signs that a hidden battle was being fought. Families, desperate to protect their impeccable reputations and avoid public scandal, would resort to elaborate cover-ups. A prolonged nervous illness requiring an extended stay at a private clinic in the mountains or by the sea was a common euphemism. These institutions, often resembling grand hotels more than hospitals, offered discretion above all else. Here, away from prying eyes, patients could undergo cures that varied wildly in their efficacy, from strict regimens of diet and fresh air to the gradual withdrawal of the very substances that had enslaved them. But even these attempts at rehabilitation were fraught with difficulty, as the true nature of dependence was so poorly understood. Relapses were common, and the cycle of desperate secrecy and temporary reprieve often continued for a lifetime. The stark contrast between the glittering public life and the shadowed private world could not be more poignant. Imagine a grand ball, teeming with hundreds of elegantly dressed guests. The orchestra swells, diamonds sparkle under 1,000 candelabra, and laughter rings through the opulent halls. You see a duke and duchess gliding effortlessly across the dance floor, their smiles perfect, their demeanor impeccable. What you cannot see is the duchess's trembling hand reaching for her husband's arm, a slight tremor she attributes to the chill in the air. What you cannot know is the subtle tremor that is a prelude to withdrawal, a silent battle being waged beneath layers of satin and lace, a desperate countdown until she can return to her private chambers and the discreet relief of her hidden vial. This was the enduring tragedy of the Belle Époque's addicted aristocrats. They lived in an era of unprecedented wealth and progress, surrounded by beauty and comfort. Yet they found themselves trapped in a different kind of poverty, an emotional and spiritual destitution that drove them to seek solace in substances that ultimately betrayed them. Their immense privilege, far from protecting them, often made them more vulnerable, providing both the means and the motive for their hidden suffering. The gilded cage, for all its splendor, proved to be an inescapable prison for the mind and body. The age of beauty and innovation also harbored a profound darkness, a testament to the enduring human struggle against pain, boredom, and the relentless pressure to maintain an illusion of perfection. You stand now at the threshold of a drawing room, its heavy velvet curtains drawn against the midday sun. The air is thick with the scent of lilies and faint, lingering cigar smoke, a testament to last night's gathering. But look closer. Beyond the shimmering silk and polished mahogany, a different kind of shadow stretches, not from the ornate lamps, but from within the very lives of those who inhabit these grand spaces. The silent battle we glimpsed earlier, the desperate countdown to relief, was not an isolated incident. It was a pervasive, unspoken truth, woven into the intricate tapestry of Belle Époque aristocratic existence. You step into the hushed elegance of the era, an age where societal expectations were as rigid as the corsets beneath ball gowns, and emotional distress was often dismissed with a delicate wave of the hand. This was a world of profound contradictions, where technological marvels advanced at breathtaking speed, yet understanding of the human mind lagged far behind. Here, amidst unprecedented luxury and dazzling social seasons, a quiet epidemic took root, blossoming in the hothouse of privilege and unchecked access. This epidemic had a name, or rather many names, each cloaked in euphemism: nerves, female complaints, melancholia, ennui. And for each of these delicate afflictions, there was a readily available, seemingly harmless remedy: laudanum. Imagine yourself in a boudoir, opulent with its damask wallpaper and chaise lounge draped in embroidered silk. Sunlight filters through lace curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. On a bedside table, nestled among porcelain trinkets and a well-worn novel, you see a small, dark bottle. It is not hidden, not entirely. Its presence is almost ordinary, part of the morning ritual. This is laudanum, a tincture of opium dissolved in alcohol. For centuries, it had been hailed as a miracle cure, a panacea for almost every ailment known to humankind. Doctors prescribed it liberally, pharmacists sold it openly, and it could be found in almost every home, from the humblest cottage to the grandest chateau. For the wealthy, its availability was limitless, its cost a mere trifle. The aristocracy, with their delicate constitutions and often constrained lives, found themselves particularly susceptible to the allure of laudanum. Their days, though seemingly filled with leisure, were often fraught with a unique set of pressures. The relentless pursuit of social standing, the intricate dance of etiquette, the constant need to maintain an image of effortless perfection, all contributed to a pervasive undercurrent of anxiety. You might attend endless dinner parties, your smile fixed, your conversation sparkling, all while a frantic hum of worry vibrated just beneath the surface. Perhaps you feared a social misstep, a whispered rumor, or the ever-present scrutiny of your peers. Or perhaps, more profoundly, you simply felt a deep, existential boredom, a profound lack of purpose despite your immense material blessings. The term nerves became the catch-all diagnosis for this constellation of psychological distress. If you were an aristocratic woman, your nervous disposition could be attributed to the inherent fragility of your sex, a notion widely accepted by the medical establishment of the time. If you were a man, it might be the burden of your position, the weight of your responsibilities, or the intellectual strain of managing vast estates or political careers. Regardless of gender, nerves provided a convenient, socially acceptable explanation for any deviation from the composed, elegant ideal. And for nerves, laudanum was the undisputed sovereign. You observe a woman, perhaps the very countess from our opening scene, seated at her dressing table. Her maid meticulously brushes her long hair, preparing it for the evening's festivities. But the countess's reflection betrays a tremor in her hand as she reaches for a small silver flask, disguised as a perfume bottle. With practiced ease, she pours a few drops of its contents into her morning tea, stirring it with a delicate spoon. The bitter taste is a familiar friend, a harbinger of the calm that will soon settle over her. This is not seen as an indulgence, but as a necessary medicinal act. The doctor, consulted for her chronic headaches, her persistent insomnia, her vague feelings of unease, would have readily prescribed it. "A few drops for your nerves, my dear," he might have said with a reassuring smile, entirely unaware of the insidious trap he was laying. The physicians of the Belle Époque, despite their growing understanding of germ theory and surgical techniques, were largely ignorant of the true nature of addiction. Opium derivatives, including laudanum, morphine, and later heroin, were considered wonder drugs. They offered immediate relief from pain, quelled coughs, eased digestive complaints, and, crucially for the aristocrats, quieted the turbulent storms of the mind. They were seen as legitimate pharmaceutical tools, not as substances that could hijack the very will of an individual. You can almost hear the doctor's confident pronouncements: "This will calm your agitation, this will ensure a restful sleep, this will soothe your chronic discomfort." These were not words of warning but promises of respite. For the wealthy, who had the means to summon doctors to their homes, to purchase the finest quality laudanum in generous quantities, the pathway to dependence was smoother, less obstructed. You did not have to resort to back-alley purchases or suspicious concoctions. Your addiction was sanctioned, legitimized by the medical establishment itself. It became part of a refined routine. A small dose in the morning to steel oneself for the day's social obligations. Another in the afternoon to ward off the languor and anxiety that often accompanied the quiet hours. A final, larger dose in the evening to ensure a dreamless sleep, escaping the racing thoughts and nameless fears that plagued the night. Think of the lavish banquets you might attend. The gleaming silver, the crystal glasses chiming, the rich aromas of roasted meats and fine wines. You are surrounded by laughter and spirited conversation, yet a low thrum of discomfort pulses beneath your elaborate waistcoat or tightly laced bodice. Perhaps a dull ache in your joints, a tension headache blossoming behind your eyes, or simply the gnawing emptiness of profound boredom. You discreetly excuse yourself, slip away to a quiet corridor, and take a quick sip from a small flask hidden in your pocket or reticule. The warmth spreads through you, the edges of your discomfort soften, and you can return to the glittering throng, your composure restored, your facade impenetrable. The illusion of control was perhaps the most dangerous aspect of this aristocratic addiction. You, the sophisticated gentleman or elegant lady, believed you were simply managing a minor ailment, exercising a refined choice in self-medication. You were not a common drunkard, nor a street addict. Your addiction wore the disguise of gentility, of medical necessity. You could afford the best doctors, the purest preparations. Surely you told yourself this meant you were immune to the baser consequences. You could stop any time. Yet, the subtle tightening of the invisible chains began almost imperceptibly. A slight increase in dosage here, a more frequent administration there. The body, with its relentless pursuit of equilibrium, adapted, demanding more and more of the substance to achieve the same desired effect. The daily rituals of the elite provided ample opportunity for discreet consumption. You might have a private study, where your trusted valet would ensure your decanter of laudanum was always full, disguised as a cordial. Or as a woman, your lady's maid, fiercely loyal and ever discreet, might prepare your morning tonic, knowing full well its true ingredients, yet never uttering a word. This complicity, born of loyalty or fear of losing one's position, further insulated the addicted aristocrat from the harsh realities of their dependence. The servants became unwitting guardians of the secret, their silence a crucial component of the elaborate deception. You stroll through a manicured garden, the air heavy with the scent of roses. Your companion, a baroness known for her exquisite taste and sharp wit, pauses by a marble fountain. Her hand trembles slightly as she adjusts her parasol. Her eyes, though framed by a stylish veil, seem a little too bright, her pupils slightly dilated. You notice a faint, sweetish odor, not of the flowers but something else, something cloying and medicinal, lingering about her. She attributes her occasional pallor and fluctuating moods to the vapors, a fashionable term for a myriad of female complaints. In reality, she is in the throes of a mild withdrawal, counting the minutes until she can return to her private rooms and her preferred form of solace. The Belle Époque, for all its public displays of moral rectitude and refined sensibilities, was riddled with hypocrisy. While public drunkenness was scorned, and scandalous affairs whispered about behind fans, the quiet, pervasive use of opiates was often overlooked, rationalized, or simply ignored. You could be seen as sophisticated, even cultured, for seeking a physician's remedy for your delicate sensibilities, even if that remedy was leading you down a path of profound dependence. The social stigma attached to the cause of suffering, a lack of moral fiber, a weakness of will, was expertly sidestepped by presenting it as a medical condition, one that only a powerful pharmaceutical agent could address. The consequences, though often delayed, were inevitable. The initial euphoria, the serene calm, gradually gave way to a deeper malaise. The sparkling wit you once possessed might dim, replaced by periods of lethargy or irritability. Your once vibrant complexion might become sallow, your eyes dull. The tremors, the nausea, the incessant aches, these became unwelcome companions, announcing the impending need for another dose, another temporary reprieve from the growing physical and psychological torment. You were no longer taking laudanum for pleasure, or even for relief from a specific ailment. You were taking it to avoid the unbearable agony of withdrawal. The gilded cage we spoke of earlier now felt tighter than ever. The wealth that provided unlimited access to the drug also provided the perfect insulation from its consequences, at least initially. You did not have to steal to feed your habit. You simply ordered more. You did not have to pawn your possessions. Your assets were vast. You did not have to endure public disgrace. Your servants were sworn to secrecy, your doctors discreet, and your social circle often too busy with their own diversions or delicate ailments to notice anything amiss beyond a general nervousness. You walk away from the hushed chambers where laudanum offered its deceptive solace. You step out from behind the velvet curtains of discreet consumption and into the vibrant, gaslit hum of Belle Époque Paris. The city itself feels like a living, breathing entity tonight, a symphony of carriage wheels on cobblestones, distant laughter, and the ceaseless murmur of human ambition. The air here is different, thicker with the scent of roasted coffee, stale tobacco, and something else, something herbal, sweet, and faintly intoxicating. It is the aroma of absinthe, the green fairy, a spirit that captured the imagination and the souls of a generation, an emerald tide that promised inspiration and delivered oblivion. This is not the quiet, internal surrender of the opium den or the measured dose of a physician's tincture. This is a public ritual, a spectacle played out in the cafés and cabarets, the intellectual salons and the grimy bars. You find yourself drawn to a particular establishment, its windows glowing like warm amber. Inside, the noise is a comfortable roar, a tapestry of voices woven with the clink of glasses and the occasional burst of a piano accordion. You observe the scene, the faces illuminated by the flickering gaslight. Artists with wild hair and intense eyes, writers hunched over notebooks, their pens scratching furiously, and yes, aristocrats. You see them, identifiable despite their attempts to blend in, their finely tailored jackets a shade too elegant, their hands perhaps a little too manicured for this bohemian haunt. They are here, drawn by the same siren song that seduces the struggling artist, the promise of escape, of heightened sensation, of a brief, glorious transcendence from the mundane. But their reasons are more complex, more deeply intertwined with the peculiar burdens of their privileged lives. The ritual itself is mesmerizing. You watch as a waiter places a faceted glass before a patron, its base thick and heavy. Then comes the absinthe, a vibrant, almost luminous green liquid, poured to a precise measure. Next, the specialized spoon, often intricately perforated and adorned with rococo swirls or floral motifs, is laid across the rim of the glass. Upon it, a sugar cube, sparkling under the light, a tiny white beacon against the dark wood of the table. And finally the drip. A slender carafe of iced water, often a work of art in itself with its elegant curves and delicate spigot, is positioned so that the water falls, drop by slow, deliberate drop, onto the sugar cube. Each droplet dissolves the sugar, carrying its sweetness down into the absinthe, swirling and twisting. The sound is a gentle rhythmic patter, a tiny percussion section in the cafe's grand orchestra of noise. As the water mingles with the emerald spirit, a transformation occurs. The clear green liquid clouds, blooming into an opaque, milky opalescence. It is called the louche, a captivating phenomenon that seems to pull the very essence of the drink into existence, like a magic trick performed for the mind. The aroma intensifies, an anise-heavy perfume with whispers of fennel and wormwood, an almost medicinal sweetness that promises both comfort and danger, a potent invitation to surrender. You lean closer, observing the drinker's face as they raise the glass. There is a sense of anticipation, a quiet reverence for the moment, a shared understanding among those present. This is more than just a drink. It is an experience, a deliberate act of communion with a myth, a pact with the green fairy herself. The first sip is usually tentative, a test of its potent bitterness, followed by a deeper draught. You can almost feel the warmth spread through their chest, the immediate lift in mood, the sharpening of the senses. The world outside the cafe walls begins to recede, its sharp edges blurring into a soft, hazy glow. This is the initial embrace of the green fairy, her gentle caress before her powerful grip. For the Belle Époque aristocrat, this scene offered an intoxicating contrast to their carefully curated lives. Their days were dictated by rigid social codes, elaborate dinners that stretched for hours, and the relentless pursuit of appropriate marriages and advantageous alliances. The expectations were immense, the emotional cost often unbearable. Laudanum offered a private retreat, a numbing oblivion for the internal turmoil. Absinthe, however, offered something different, something more outwardly expressive. a rebellious identity, a fleeting connection to a world unbound by convention, a chance to shed the gilded cage of their birthright, if only for an evening. To sit amongst artists, to feel the creative pulse of the city, to indulge in a drink celebrated by poets and painters. This was a thrilling transgression, a secret rebellion whispered over clouded glasses. It was a calculated risk, a deliberate flirtation with the other side, a brief but exhilarating escape from the suffocating grandeur of their own existence. The very decorum that defined their lives often left them feeling emotionally starved, their souls longing for something raw, something genuine, something that pulsed with the untamed energy they glimpsed in the bohemian enclaves. Absinthe promised that vitality. Consider the artist Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, a man born into aristocracy, yet whose life was defined by the bohemian underworld of Montmartre. You can imagine him, his small stature easily overlooked, but his eyes missing nothing, a glass of absinthe perpetually within reach. For him, and for many others like him, the drink was a bridge between worlds, a lubricant for observation, a stimulant for his extraordinary vision, allowing him to pierce through the superficiality and capture the gritty truth of human experience. But even for those without his artistic genius, the appeal was immense. You might be a young countess, stifled by the expectations of your family, her future meticulously planned, every conversation at dinner an exercise in veiled diplomacy. Or a jaded baron, bored by the endless rounds of society balls, the predictable conversations, the hollow pursuit of status. In the hazy glow of an absinthe bar, you could momentarily cast off your titles, your responsibilities, your very public persona, and become simply a participant in the great, messy, vibrant drama of Parisian life. You could discuss art, philosophy, politics with a freedom rarely afforded in your own drawing rooms. You could feel alive, truly alive, in a way that your comfortable existence rarely permitted, unburdened by the weight of your name or the gaze of your peers. The stories around absinthe were as potent as the drink itself. Tales of inspiration, of visions, of unlocking hidden creative reserves, of moments of pure, unadulterated genius. Artists like Vincent van Gogh were rumored to consume it, though historical accounts differ on its precise role in his mental state. Poets like Paul Verlaine and Arthur Rimbaud were famous for their absinthe-fueled debauchery and poetic genius, their works often directly inspired by its strange embrace. For the aristocrats who ventured into this world, the allure was not just the drink itself, but the promise of tapping into this wellspring of creativity, of becoming part of something larger, something more authentic than the superficialities of their own class. You, sipping your own glass, might believe for a fleeting moment that your own perceptions are sharpened, your thoughts clearer, your imagination more vivid, that the very boundaries of your mind are dissolving, revealing new horizons. The world around you seems to shimmer with a heightened intensity, colors more vibrant, sounds more distinct, every sensation amplified. But the green fairy had a darker side, a potent poison beneath her shimmering wings, far more insidious than the immediate intoxication. The initial euphoria, the sense of expanded consciousness, often gave way to something far more sinister. The high alcohol content of absinthe, typically between 65 and 75% by volume, was enough to quickly incapacitate even the most seasoned drinker, leading to a swift descent into drunkenness. But it was the alleged thujone, a chemical compound found in wormwood, the herb from which absinthe derived its name, that became the focus of intense medical and moral panic. Though modern science has largely debunked the idea of thujone as a powerful hallucinogen in the doses found in commercial absinthe, attributing most of the ill effects to pure alcoholism, the perception at the time was that it was the root cause of the drink's unique and destructive effects, distinct from mere alcohol intoxication. This distinction, however scientifically dubious, made absinthe a special kind of demon. Doctors began to identify a new syndrome, absinthism. Its symptoms were terrifyingly vivid: hallucinations, convulsions, tremors, insomnia, a profound paranoia, and a profound, irreversible mental decline. You might witness a once distinguished gentleman, now a regular at these establishments, his hands trembling uncontrollably as he tries to lift his glass, the liquid sloshing precariously. His eyes, once bright and discerning, now held a dull, distant glaze, haunted by unseen specters. His conversation, once witty and engaging, now devolved into rambling incoherence or sudden violent outbursts, his temper frayed beyond repair. The carefully constructed facade of aristocratic decorum crumbled under the relentless assault of the green fairy, revealing a broken man beneath. The moral panic surrounding absinthe escalated rapidly, mirroring and amplifying the growing anxieties of a society in flux. It was blamed for crime, for madness, for social decay, for everything from domestic violence to economic hardship. Caricatures in newspapers depicted absinthe drinkers as depraved and dangerous, their minds warped, their bodies wasted, their families ruined. The drink, once celebrated as the muse of artists, became a scapegoat for all of society's ills, a tangible symbol of the perceived moral erosion of the fin de siècle. It was seen as particularly insidious because it crossed social boundaries with such ease. It was cheap enough to be consumed by the working classes, yet chic enough to be embraced by the elite. This democratic destructiveness only fueled the fear, creating a unified front of public condemnation. The green menace threatened to corrupt all strata of society. For the addicted aristocrat, the social condemnation of absinthe presented a new layer of hypocrisy and danger. While laudanum addiction could be hidden behind closed doors and coded language about nerves, absinthe addiction was often public and undeniable. The physical symptoms were harder to conceal. The late-night excursions to bohemian haunts, once a thrilling escape, now became a perilous gamble with their reputation, a public display of their private demons. Imagine yourself, a person of considerable standing, attempting to maintain your social position while battling the insidious grip of absinthe. You might try to moderate, to only indulge on certain nights, to convince yourself you were still in control, but the craving, the compulsion would gnaw at you, an insistent whisper driving you back to the green glow, to the familiar ritual. The exquisite tension of living a double life, the impeccable aristocrat by day, the absinthe-addled bohemian by night, eventually became unsustainable, the strain too great. The cycle was cruelly familiar. The initial rush of creative freedom and heightened sensation gave way to dependency, a desperate physical and psychological need. The desire for inspiration became a desperate need to simply function, to quiet the tremors, to chase away the creeping paranoia. The mornings after were filled with crushing hangovers, profound anxiety, and the chilling realization of lost time, forgotten conversations, and perhaps irreparable social blunders. The very thing that promised to liberate you from the stifling constraints of your world instead bound you in chains of a different making, chains that pulled you further and further into the mire. Your privilege, which should have insulated you, only made your fall more spectacular, more observed, and perhaps more tragic. The whispered gossip in the salons would shift from the latest scandal to the obvious decline of so-and-so, whose eyes now held that telltale vacant stare, whose hands trembled even as they held a teacup, whose once sharp wit had dulled into a melancholic silence. The grand estates and opulent homes, once symbols of power and stability, became gilded prisons for broken souls. The cultural impact was immense and enduring. Absinthe became synonymous with bohemian decadence, a symbol of a society teetering on the edge of modernity and moral collapse, a harbinger of the anxieties that would define the 20th century. It inspired countless works of art, capturing its allure and its devastation. Edgar Degas' painting L'Absinthe captures the bleak despair of two figures, slumped over a café table, their vacant stares reflecting the drink's isolating power, a tableau of urban alienation. Toulouse-Lautrec, despite his own indulgence, depicted the raw, unvarnished truth of Montmartre life, where absinthe flowed freely, stripping away pretense. This artistic documentation serves as a stark reminder of the drink's pervasive influence, a green shadow cast over an otherwise glittering age. Eventually the pressure became too great. Across Europe, temperance movements gained traction, fueled by medical reports, moral outrage, and a growing desire for social order in a rapidly changing world. Switzerland banned absinthe in 1910, followed by France in 1915, after a long and fierce public debate that pitted cultural freedom against public health. The Green Fairy was banished, driven from the cafes and bars, replaced by other spirits, other forms of escape, but never truly forgotten. Her memory lingered, an enduring symbol of a peculiar era, of the human desire to transcend reality, and the often catastrophic consequences of that quest, particularly when privilege blurred the lines between indulgence and dependency. You stand there now, in the imagined café, the ghost of anise still lingering faintly in the air. You have witnessed the full arc of Absinthe's story, from its initial embrace as a bohemian muse, a gateway to creativity and rebellion, to its transformation into a societal demon, to its eventual banishment. You have seen how it promised inspiration and liberation, particularly to those burdened by the golden chains of aristocracy, only to deliver a different, more insidious form of bondage, a slow, green descent into ruin. The quest for escape, whether through the narcotic haze of laudanum or the emerald embrace of absinthe, was a desperate attempt to fill a void, to soothe an anxiety that the Belle Époque's abundant wealth and beauty, for all its dazzling splendor, simply could not assuage. The privilege of your birth, the ease of your existence, had ironically become the fertile ground for your undoing. The boundless wealth that defined your life also provided the means to sink deeper into the shadows, making the climb back out seem increasingly impossible. The Belle Époque, this age of astounding beauty and innovation, this crucible of art and science, also presented a tragic tableau of hidden suffering. The aristocratic world, with its grand balls and elaborate rituals, concealed countless private battles against an invisible foe. You, the observer, are now privy to this secret. You understand the insidious allure of the whispers of laudanum, how it promised peace but delivered bondage, how it sought to soothe the nerves, but ultimately shattered the spirit. You now also comprehend the seductive call of the Green Fairy, how it offered bohemian decadence and artistic freedom, only to lead its devotees down a path of mental and physical decay, stripping away their dignity and their very selves. The stage is set for a deeper exploration of this hidden tragedy, of the lives consumed and the desperate measures taken, not just to survive, but to reclaim a lost self from the clutches of the very remedies that promise salvation. The whispers of despair grow louder, beckoning you further into the hidden corners of this glittering age, where even light cannot fully penetrate the accumulating shadows. You leave the elegant rooms, feeling the cold echo of a high that always demanded a steeper fall. You have witnessed the bright, brittle madness of cocaine and the quiet, insidious lull of morphine. Now your path turns, descending deeper still into the labyrinthine desires of the Belle Époque, to a realm more shrouded, more perfumed, more overtly forbidden, the opium den. The journey to this secret world begins not with the promise of invigorating power or a gentle sigh into nothingness, but with the lure of the exotic, the forbidden, the profound surrender. You step away from the gaslit boulevards, the clatter of carriages, the polite laughter filtering from drawing rooms. The air grows heavier, tinged with a different kind of mystery as you navigate narrower streets, their cobblestones slick with recent rain, reflecting the distant glow of city lights like scattered jewels. You are drawn by an unspoken invitation, a whispered address, a subtle nod from someone who knows the hidden passages of this glittering age. The sounds of the city begin to recede, replaced by a softer hum, a sense of hushed anticipation. The grand facades of the Parisian apartments give way to less ostentatious buildings, their windows dark, their entrances less grand. You notice the absence of casual passers-by, a sign that you are moving beyond the common thoroughfare, into a territory of discretion. Eventually you stop before an unassuming doorway, perhaps tucked between a closed shop front and a silent residential building. There is no sign, no overt advertisement, just an almost imperceptible signal, a faint glow behind a curtained window, or the particular scent that begins to drift into the night air. You knock, not with a forceful rap, but with a specific rhythm, a code known only to a select few. The door opens just a crack, revealing a sliver of darkness, then a watchful eye. A silent exchange, a recognition, and then you are admitted. The door closes behind you with a soft thud, severing you from the outside world. Immediately you are enveloped. The first sensation is the scent. It is thick, sweet, cloying, yet strangely alluring. The unmistakable aroma of burnt opium, mixed with incense, sandalwood, and perhaps the fainter notes of old textiles and human sweat. It clings to your clothes, to your hair, an immediate mark of your presence in this hidden space. The light is dim, usually provided by shaded lamps, casting long, wavering shadows across the room. There are no harsh electric lights here. This is a world of twilight, of secrets whispered and dreams dreamt. Your eyes adjust slowly, revealing the details of a room designed for languor and escape. You find yourself in a space furnished for comfort and indulgence, often with an exotic flair. Low divans and cushioned platforms line the walls, draped in rich silks and brocades, often from the East. Thick rugs silence your footsteps. Pillows are piled high, inviting reclining poses. The atmosphere is heavy, not just with smoke, but with a palpable sense of timelessness, of suspended reality. The air is still, thick and warm, almost humid, making breathing feel slower, deeper. Here time seems to stretch and distort, its urgency forgotten. People move with a deliberate slowness, their voices hushed, almost reverential. There is a quiet etiquette to the opium den, a shared understanding of its purpose and its unspoken rules. You observe the occupants. Unlike the bustling energy of a café or the formal stiffness of a salon, these individuals are in various stages of repose. Some lie stretched out on the divans, their eyes closed, their faces serene or perhaps etched with a faraway expression. Others sit up, holding the long pipes, their movements slow and deliberate as they attend to the ritual. And who are these people, you wonder, who seek such a profound disconnection from the world? In the popular imagination, opium dens were often associated with the working class, with Chinese immigrants, with the disreputable fringes of society. But you are not in such a place. You are in a den catering to a different clientele, a more exclusive, more discreet world. You see them here, the addicted aristocrats of the Belle Époque. The scions of old families, their names synonymous with wealth and power and influence. The artists and poets, their minds already restless, seeking new forms of inspiration. The intellectuals, weary of the demands of reason, longing for the embrace of unreason. The socialites, bored by the endless rounds of balls and dinners, craving a deeper, more profound sensation than mere champagne or gossip could offer. Why opium for these privileged few? The answer is complex, woven into the very fabric of the age. It was a time of immense change, of scientific advancement and artistic ferment, but also of existential doubt. The old certainties were crumbling. The pursuit of pleasure, of novelty, of intense experience, became a driving force for many who felt a void beneath the glittering surface of society. Opium, with its ancient, exotic mystique, offered something unique. It was not the brief, electrifying burst of cocaine, promising superhuman energy before a crushing fall. It was not the gentle, numbing escape of morphine, which simply quieted the pain. Opium promised a journey. A slow, unfolding voyage into the depths of the self, or perhaps away from it, into a realm of vivid dreams and profound tranquility. It was an adventure for the mind, a rebellion against the strictures of Victorian morality and the increasing speed of modern life. You watch as a server, usually silent and deferential, moves among the patrons. He carries the tools of the ritual, the small lamp, its flame a steady beacon in the dimness, the long pipe with its distinctive bowl, and the chandu, the prepared opium paste, a dark, viscous substance. Observe the process. A smoker takes the pipe, its stem often made of bamboo or ivory, its bowl a small ceramic cap. The chandu is heated over the lamp, slowly, carefully until it bubbles and darkens. The smoker skillfully manipulates the paste with a needle-like tool, shaping it into a small pellet, placing it precisely over the tiny hole in the bowl. Then the inhalation. Not a quick puff, but a deep, slow draw, the flame of the lamp drawing the smoke down into the pipe, filling the lungs. The smoker holds it, sometimes for a remarkably long time, before exhaling a cloud of sweet, heavy smoke. There is no rush. Each inhalation is a step further into the dream. The first few draws might bring a slight nausea, a dizziness, but then, if the user persists, comes the profound relaxation. A wave washes over you, warm and heavy, dissolving tension from every muscle. Your limbs feel weighted, yet wonderfully light. The mind begins to drift, untethered from the usual anxieties and concerns. Thoughts become slower, more expansive. The boundaries between waking and dreaming blur. You might experience vivid hallucinations, not frightening or manic, but often beautiful, symbolic, or intensely personal. Colors seem richer, sounds more resonant, ideas more profound. Time loses its meaning entirely. An hour might feel like a minute or a moment like an eternity. For the aristocrats and bohemians, this was a coveted state. For the artists, it was a source of inspiration, a way to tap into the subconscious, to break free from conventional perception. Baudelaire, the poet, famously explored the artificial paradises of hashish and opium, seeking to expand the human spirit, even at great personal cost. Jean Cocteau, the multi-talented artist, openly documented his struggles and fascination with opium, seeing it as both muse and monster. The opium den was a sanctuary for such pursuits. Here the artist could find visions, the philosopher new perspectives, the bored socialite a thrill deeper than any societal transgression. It was a world where inhibitions melted, where facades dropped, where the raw, vulnerable self could emerge or dissolve. But this profound journey came at a cost. The allure of opium was its insidious nature. It did not violently seize you like cocaine, but rather gently, persistently, drew you into its embrace. Dependence was almost inevitable for regular users. The body craved the sweet relief, the mind longed for the dream world. As the habit takes hold, the effects begin to show. The initial euphoria and vivid dreams give way to a pervasive lethargy when not under the influence. Sleep becomes disturbed. The appetite dwindles. The once elegant aristocrat might become gaunt, their skin sallow, their eyes sunken. The sparkling wit dulls, replaced by a dull, craving-driven existence. The daily ritual of the pipe becomes paramount, overshadowing all other responsibilities. Fortunes are slowly squandered, discreetly at first, then more overtly to procure the precious chandu. Social engagements are missed, careers neglected, reputations tarnished. But all this happens behind closed doors in the shadows, far from the public eye. The secrecy surrounding these dens, especially those frequented by the elite, was a testament to the immense social stigma associated with addiction, even as society turned a blind eye to its prevalence among the privileged. Opium was seen as exotic, yes, but also as profoundly decadent, a sign of moral decay. To be discovered as an opium addict meant ruin, not just for the individual but potentially for the entire family name. So the aristocrats lived double lives. By day they maintained their decorum, attended their social functions, managed their estates. By night, or whenever the craving became too great, they would slip away, guided by the familiar scent and the silent understanding of their fellow travelers into the dream world. You might hear hushed conversations, fragmented sentences that suggest profound insights or deep anxieties, only to trail off into silence. Sometimes, there is only the soft gurgle of the pipe, the steady hiss of the flame, and the gentle sighs of contentment or resignation. Consider the stark contrast between this world and the glittering ballrooms or the intellectually charged salons. Here all pretense is dropped. There is a strange equality in the den, born of shared vulnerability. Titles and fortunes matter little when one is utterly surrendered to the pipe. The only currency is the chandu, the only desire, the next profound inhalation. The opium den was more than just a place to consume a drug. It was a psychological space, a refuge from the pressures of a rapidly modernizing world. For those sensitive souls, those burdened by expectation, or simply those seeking ultimate novelty, it offered a complete severance from reality. It promised not just forgetfulness, but transformation. Yet it was a false promise. The transformation was not an ascent to a higher state of being, but a slow descent into dependence and decay. The dreams, however vivid, could not sustain a waking life. The peace, however profound, was temporary, always demanding a steeper price. As the Belle Époque drew to a close, and the world marched towards the horrors of the 20th century, the romanticized allure of opium began to wane. Increased medical understanding of addiction, coupled with social and legal crackdowns, pushed the opium dens further into the margins, transforming them from a bohemian indulgence into a stark emblem of societal decay. You stand in the lingering scent of smoke, feeling the heavy silence of the den. You have witnessed a world built on profound escapism, a secret society of dreamers and addicts, seeking solace and sensation in the tendrils of a sweet, insidious smoke. The path out is less difficult than the path in, but it leaves an impression. You carry the scent with you, a phantom clinging to your clothes, a reminder of the hidden desires that pulsed beneath the elegant surface of a bygone era. You emerge into the cooler night air, the sounds of the city returning, sharper now, more immediate. The world outside seems almost too bright, too loud, after the subdued tranquility of the den. You leave this realm understanding that while cocaine promised power and morphine offered oblivion, opium offered a complete, albeit fleeting, dissolution of the self into a fabricated reality. It was the ultimate surrender, a seductive trap that offered profound peace at the cost of one's waking life. The Belle Époque's search for beauty and transcendence, for meaning and escape, sometimes led to these darker, more profound hidden realms, where the greatest pleasure came from losing oneself entirely. And as you walk away, the lingering aroma of the chandu seems to whisper a timeless truth. All paradises, especially artificial ones, eventually demand their price. The cool night air might offer a momentary respite, a cleansing breath, but the weight of that truth, of the price demanded, settles around you like a shroud. You have seen the allure, felt the seductive pull of oblivion and artificial transcendence. Now you must witness the cost, the hidden toll exacted beneath the shimmering surface of the Belle Époque. For every exhilarating rush of cocaine, for every blissful drift of morphine, for every dream-soaked journey with opium, there was a debt accumulating, not just in francs but in flesh and spirit. The aristocrats of this era, the very architects of its glittering facade, were often its most tragic victims. Their lives, once paragons of elegance and leisure, began to unravel, thread by silken thread, beneath the gaze of a society both fascinated and appalled. You picture them now, not as they appeared at the grand balls or in the manicured gardens, but in the quiet desperation of their private chambers. You imagine the Duchess, her eyes once sparkling with wit, now dulled by the constant pursuit of a calming injection. You see the young Count, his once vigorous stride now faltering, his charm replaced by an anxious tremor, his conversation punctuated by sudden silences, a telltale sign of the substance's grip. The pursuit of pleasure, that defining characteristic of the Belle Époque, had, for many, morphed into a relentless chase for relief. The initial thrill gave way to a gnawing need, a physical and psychological craving that overshadowed all other desires. What began as a fashionable indulgence, a secret shared among daring friends, soon became an invisible master, dictating their days and haunting their nights. You might wonder how such widespread addiction could exist, largely unacknowledged in such a visible high society world. The answer lies in the masterful art of concealment, a skill perfected by the aristocracy. A rigid code of decorum demanded outward perfection, and any deviation, especially one as scandalous as drug addiction, had to be meticulously hidden. It was a performance, elaborate and constant, played out on the grand stages of Parisian salons and country estates. Imagine the intricate web of lies, the fabricated illnesses, the sudden migraines that kept one away from social engagements, the endless excuses for dwindling finances or erratic behavior. Servants were often complicit, their silence bought with extra wages, their loyalty tested by the harrowing demands of their employers' secret lives. Doctors, too, sometimes played a dual role, providing the very substances that fostered addiction, often under the guise of therapeutic treatment for nerves or hysteria. They prescribed morphine for insomnia, cocaine for fatigue, and laudanum for anxiety, inadvertently or knowingly fueling the dependency. You stand by as a lady of exquisite taste, renowned for her beauty, excuses herself early from a dinner party, claiming a sudden indisposition. You know the truth. She is not ill in the conventional sense. She is simply feeling the insidious claw of withdrawal, the creeping dread that signals the need for another dose, another temporary escape from reality. Her hands, delicate and adorned with jewels, tremble almost imperceptibly as she reaches for the small silver case hidden in her boudoir, her once vibrant complexion now a pale echo of its former glory. The physical toll was devastating and undeniable, even if often attributed to other maladies. You witness the gauntness that replaces youthful plumpness, the sunken eyes that betray sleepless nights or drug-induced stupors. The skin, once smooth and lustrous, becomes sallow, sometimes marked by the track lines of repeated injections, cleverly concealed by long sleeves or heavy makeup. The vibrant energy that characterized the youthful aristocrat slowly drains away, replaced by a lethargy that only a fresh dose could temporarily alleviate. Think of the nervous tremors, the constant fidgeting, the erratic heartbeat, the digestive issues that plagued these individuals. Morphine users often suffered from chronic constipation and severe weight loss. Cocaine fiends experienced insomnia, paranoia, and nasal damage. Opium smokers withered, their bodies growing frail, their minds consumed by the hazy dreams of the pipe. These were not the robust, idealized figures of society portraits. These were hollowed-out individuals, shells of their former selves, haunted by a hunger that transcended mere appetite. The mental and emotional degradation was equally profound. You hear the whispers of paranoia in their voices, the sudden outbursts of anger or despair. The keen intellect that once engaged in sparkling conversation dulled, their capacity for sustained thought or artistic creation diminished. Ambition, once a driving force, gave way to a singular focus, securing the next fix. Relationships suffered as trust eroded, replaced by suspicion and manipulation. Loved ones watched helplessly as charm turned to churlishness, generosity to selfishness. Consider the Duchess who, once the center of every social circle, now finds solace only in solitude, her days structured around the precise timing of her next self-administered remedy. Her once meticulous wardrobe now seems neglected, her jewels lie unworn, her once magnificent library gathering dust. You see the slow, agonizing fade of personality, the brilliant spark extinguished by the relentless demands of addiction. The moral toll was perhaps the most tragic. As the addiction deepened, the conventional moral compass often spun wildly. Debts mounted, not always from lavish spending, but from the desperate need to procure increasingly expensive substances. Fortunes, built over generations, were squandered in the shadows of pharmacies and illicit back alleys. Family heirlooms disappeared, pawned for ready cash. You feel the cold dread of desperation as you imagine a once proud nobleman resorting to deceit, even theft, To feed his insatiable craving, the scandal, if it broke, was ruinous. A whisper of morphine addiction could destroy a reputation, shatter a marriage, or disinherit an heir. The facade of aristocratic virtue was fiercely protected, and any chink in its armor was swiftly patched over, or, failing that, the offending party was exiled, quietly, to a distant country estate or a sanitarium far from prying eyes. These institutions, often euphemistically called rest homes or curative establishments, became reluctant havens for those whose addictions could no longer be concealed. You walk through the hushed corridors of one such sanatorium, the air heavy with the scent of antiseptics and despair. Here the pretense of social standing is stripped away. You see men and women, once powerful and privileged, now stripped of their dignity, struggling through agonizing withdrawals, their pleas for relief often met with cold indifference or harsh discipline. The treatments were often crude and ineffective, ranging from forced isolation and hydrotherapy to bizarre surgical interventions, all predicated on a flawed understanding of addiction as a moral failing rather than a disease. The contrast between the outward splendor of the Belle Époque and the internal decay of many of its leading figures creates a profound irony. The era celebrated beauty, progress, and joie de vivre, yet within its gilded cages, countless individuals were trapped in cycles of despair. The very pursuit of intensified sensation and heightened experience, lauded by artists and intellectuals, had a dark underbelly, proving to be a double-edged sword for those who ventured too far. Consider the impact on the family unit. You watch as a wife, once cherished, becomes a mere shadow, her life consumed by managing her husband's secret, covering his tracks and enduring his unpredictable moods. Children, growing up in homes where a parent was perpetually absent or emotionally volatile, bore the silent scars of instability and neglect. The glittering family portraits on the walls belied the profound dysfunction that festered within. For women, the consequences of addiction were often even more dire. A male aristocrat might be discreetly packed off to a sanatorium, his illness attributed to overwork or a delicate constitution. For a woman, the stigma was crushing. A fallen woman, particularly one addicted to drugs, could face social ostracism, divorce, and the loss of her children. Her reputation, the bedrock of her standing in society, would be irrevocably shattered. Opium, in particular, was seen as a vice that unmade women, stripping them of their virtue and respectability. You observe the desperate measures some women took to maintain their addiction while preserving their delicate image. The secret stashes hidden in hat boxes or beneath floorboards. The hushed conversations with pharmacists, bribing them to bypass regulations. The self-administering, often clumsily done, leaving bruises and marks that had to be carefully concealed beneath layers of clothing. The fear of exposure was a constant companion, a suffocating presence more terrifying than the physical discomfort of withdrawal. The Belle Époque, in its quest for beauty and progress, also wrestled with the burgeoning understanding of mental health and societal ills. As the century progressed, the casual acceptance of opiates and cocaine for various ailments began to wane, giving way to a nascent awareness of their addictive properties. Public health concerns grew, spurred by sensationalist newspaper reports and the increasing visibility of the problem among all social strata, not just the elite. You hear the early calls for regulation, the first hesitant steps towards classifying these substances as dangerous, not merely therapeutic. Yet, for many years, the wealthy continued to find ways around such restrictions, their privilege often allowing them access to what was denied to the common person. The hypocrisy was stark. While the poor might face harsh penalties for drug use, the rich often received a discreet cure, or a quiet exile. The toll extended beyond personal tragedy to the very fabric of aristocratic life. The leaders of society, the patrons of the arts, the custodians of tradition, were often compromised, their judgment clouded, their energies diverted. The visionaries became listless, the philanthropists became spendthrifts, the trendsetters became recluses. The grand narratives of progress and cultural flourishing sometimes masked a quiet capitulation to internal demons. You see the decline not just in individuals, but in the vibrancy of certain social circles. The sparkling wit gives way to dullness, the grand soirees become fewer and less brilliant, the innovative projects remain unfinished. The Belle Époque, with all its outward vitality, carried within it the seeds of its own dissolution, nurtured in part by the very substances that promised to enhance life, but ultimately diminished it. The illusion of effortless grace and endless prosperity began to crack under the weight of these hidden burdens. The world of silk and lace, of champagne and caviar, harbored a darker truth. A generation of privileged individuals trapped in a self-made purgatory. Their bodies wasted, their minds clouded, their fortunes squandered, they became monuments to the seductive power of escape and the devastating consequences of its overuse. As you step further away from the lingering shadows of the dens and the opulent homes where these struggles played out, you understand that the price demanded by these artificial paradises was often life itself, or at least, a life worth living. The Belle Époque's glittering charm, its pursuit of beauty and sensation, was indelibly stained by the quiet suffering of those who sought solace in powders, tinctures, and pipes. The hidden toll was profound, a testament to the fact that even in the most exquisite of cages, addiction held its captives as tightly as any iron bar, slowly, inexorably, grinding them down beneath the weight of its insatiable demands. And so, you carry with you not just the memory of gilded salons and secret dens, but also the haunting echoes of lives unraveled, of promises unfulfilled, of the silent, desperate battles fought beneath the surface of an age that outwardly celebrated only joy and beauty. The true history of the Belle Époque, you now realize, is also a chronicle of its hidden sorrows, a somber counterpoint to its radiant reputation, forever etched into the collective memory by the indelible marks of its secret addictions. The silence that now surrounds you feels heavy, pregnant with the unspoken stories of those who paid the ultimate price for their fleeting moments of artificial bliss. The elegance, the artistry, the sheer exuberance of the era, all cast in a new, more somber light, revealing the human cost of a relentless pursuit of sensation and escape. The beauty of the age was undeniably captivating, but beneath the silk and lace, a hidden epidemic quietly claimed its victims, one aristocratic soul at a time, leaving behind a legacy of both brilliance and profound, whispered tragedy. You pause, letting the full weight of this realization sink in. The vibrant tapestry of the Belle Époque, so intricately woven with threads of innovation, luxury, and artistic fervor, also contained darker, more brittle fibers of dependency and despair. These hidden struggles, so carefully guarded from public view, were as integral to the era's true character as its grandest accomplishments. They serve as a poignant reminder that even in times of unparalleled prosperity and societal advancement, the human heart's yearning for escape and the allure of forbidden pleasures can lead to unforeseen and devastating consequences, ultimately casting a long shadow over even the brightest of golden ages. The journey through this gilded era continues, but now you carry a deeper understanding, a more nuanced perspective, seeing not only the dazzling surface but also the profound depths of human vulnerability that lay beneath. The stories of those who succumbed to the hidden toll of addiction are now an undeniable part of your memory of the Belle Époque, tempering its brilliance with a poignant sense of the fragility of even the most privileged existence. The price, you realize, was paid not just by individuals, but by the very spirit of an era that sought to define itself by pleasure, only to find pain lurking in its most cherished indulgences. The brilliant sheen of the Belle Époque, you have come to realize, often masked profound depths of human vulnerability, a silent chorus of suffering beneath the celebrated extravagance. You have glimpsed the hidden tolls, the personal price paid for an era defined by indulgence. Now, as your journey through this paradoxical golden age continues, you must confront an even more unsettling truth. The very hands entrusted with healing, with safeguarding well-being, often inadvertently played a crucial role in deepening the shadows of addiction. Imagine yourself in a grand Parisian salon, the air thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. A delicate woman, perhaps a marquise, reclines on a velvet chaise longue, a lace handkerchief pressed to her temple. She complains of a persistent headache, a tremor in her hand, a general malaise that saps her vivacity. Her husband, a baron of considerable influence, watches with concern. They summon their family physician, a man of impeccable manners and distinguished bearing, his black leather bag clutched firmly in his gloved hand. He listens intently, nods sagely, and with an air of profound authority, produces a small vial. Within it, a clear liquid, perhaps containing a powerful alkaloid recently isolated and heralded as a wonder cure, morphine. At this juncture in history, the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the understanding of narcotics and their long-term effects was dramatically different from today. You must strip away your modern knowledge, your contemporary cautions, to truly grasp the medical landscape of the Belle Époque. Physicians, scientists, and the public alike were captivated by the rapid advancements in chemistry and pharmacology. New compounds were being isolated from plants, purified, and marketed with astonishing claims. The pharmaceutical industry was nascent, vibrant, and largely unregulated. Consider opium, for example. For centuries, it had been a widely accepted panacea, a balm for pain, a soporific for sleepless nights, a remedy for countless ailments. Laudanum, a tincture of opium, was a household staple, found in medicine cabinets across all social strata. It was given to infants to quiet them, to adults for headaches, menstrual cramps, coughs, and digestive upsets. You could purchase it at a local apothecary, often without a prescription, a testament to its common acceptance. The addictive nature of opium was certainly known, but it was often considered a weakness of character, a failing of the lower classes, or a habit that could be controlled with discipline, rather than a powerful physiological dependency. Then came the miracle of morphine, isolated from opium in 1803 and commercialized by the 1820s. Morphine was purer, more potent, and could be administered precisely via the newly invented hypodermic syringe. The syringe, introduced in the mid-1800s, was itself seen as a triumph of modern medicine, allowing for direct, swift relief. No longer did patients have to swallow bitter concoctions. Now, a quick, painless injection could banish pain almost instantly. Imagine the profound relief, the sheer wonder, experienced by someone racked with chronic pain who, with a single prick of a needle, found blessed oblivion. Doctors hailed morphine as a godsend, a compassionate tool to alleviate suffering. It was prescribed for everything: neuralgia, rheumatism, tuberculosis, syphilis, surgical pain, childbirth pains, and perhaps most insidiously for nervous conditions, hysteria, and what was vaguely termed neurasthenia, a fashionable diagnosis for upper-class fatigue, anxiety, and general malaise. You see the pattern forming, do you not? The aristocracy, with their ample leisure, their often sedentary lifestyles, and their heightened sensitivity to discomfort, real or imagined, became prime candidates for these powerful new remedies. They sought immediate relief from their various woes, and their physicians, eager to please and genuinely believing in the efficacy of their treatments, were more than willing to provide it. The relationship between a wealthy patient and their doctor was one of profound trust and often unspoken obligation. A doctor who could provide swift comfort was highly valued, his reputation enhanced. Think of the pressures on these Belle Époque physicians. They were figures of immense respect and authority. Their patients were powerful, demanding, and accustomed to getting what they wanted. When a duchess complained of sleeplessness or a duke suffered from gout, the expectation was that the doctor would make it better and quickly. To refuse a powerful remedy, especially one lauded by medical journals and pharmaceutical companies, might have been seen as incompetence or a lack of compassion. And so, the hypodermic needle, filled with its precious, pain-erasing liquid, became a common sight in the elegant boudoirs and discreet consulting rooms of Paris, London, and Vienna. The problem, of course, was that while morphine was a spectacular painkiller, its addictive potential was monumental. But in the early days, addiction was often misconstrued. It was frequently believed that if the drug was administered by a doctor for a legitimate medical purpose, the patient would somehow be immune to its enslaving grip. This was a grave and tragic miscalculation. The medical community for a significant period failed to grasp the physiological mechanisms of addiction. They saw symptoms of withdrawal as a return of the original illness, prompting them to prescribe more of the cure. The patient, suffering from extreme discomfort when the morphine wore off, would naturally beg for another dose, reinforcing the doctor's belief that the medicine was still needed. You can almost hear the conversation, "Doctor, my pains have returned with a vengeance worse than before. I desperately need another injection." And the sympathetic doctor, nodding gravely, would oblige, unaware he was tightening the chains of dependence. Cocaine presented another fascinating and equally dangerous chapter in this medical narrative. Isolated in the 1860s, it quickly gained popularity as a local anesthetic, a stimulant, and a treatment for various conditions, including fatigue, depression, and even morphine addiction itself. Yes, you heard that correctly. In a bewildering twist of medical naivety, some physicians actually prescribed cocaine to help patients withdraw from opium or morphine, only to inadvertently trade one addiction for another, often more aggressive one. The illustrious Sigmund Freud was an early enthusiast of cocaine, praising its therapeutic properties for depression, indigestion, and as a sexual stimulant. Though he later retracted his more fervent endorsements after witnessing its destructive potential firsthand in a close friend, his initial enthusiasm was widely shared. Cocaine-laced tonics and wines such as Vin Mariani became immensely popular. You could find advertisements for these elixirs in fashionable magazines, promising renewed vigor, banishing fatigue, and elevating mood. They were consumed by royalty, politicians, artists, and naturally the wealthy elite who could afford such luxuries. Imagine the high-flying socialite, exhausted by a season of balls and endless engagements, feeling her energy wane. Her doctor, perhaps an avid reader of the latest medical journals, suggests a course of a new tonic to restore her vitality. This tonic, unbeknownst to her, or perhaps only vaguely hinted at by the doctor, contains cocaine. Initially she feels magnificent. Her spirits lift, her conversation sparkles, her fatigue vanishes. She feels sharp, witty, and unstoppable. The temporary relief is exhilarating. But as the effect wears off, a crash ensues. Irritability, anxiety, and an even deeper exhaustion. The solution? Another dose, of course. The cycle begins anew, sanctioned by medical authority and cloaked in the guise of treatment. The discreet nature of the doctor-patient relationship further enabled these dependencies. For an aristocrat, particularly an aristocratic woman, admitting to a drug habit was unthinkable. It would bring shame upon the family, ruin reputations, and lead to social ostracization. But a nervous condition, or a chronic pain requiring medical intervention, was perfectly acceptable. The doctor provided the necessary veneer of respectability. He could administer injections in the privacy of the patient's home, maintain strict confidentiality, and write prescriptions that allowed the patient to procure their chosen remedy without public scrutiny. The physician became not just a healer, but a protector of secrets, an enabler of a dangerous lifestyle, all under the guise of compassionate care. You might wonder, at what point did the medical community begin to understand the true nature of these substances? The transition was agonizingly slow and fraught with conflicting opinions. Early warnings were often dismissed or attributed to individual moral weakness rather than the pharmacology of the drugs themselves. The concept of addiction as a disease rather than a vice was still in its infancy. For example, some physicians argued that true addiction only occurred if the patient desired the drug for pleasure, not if they took it to alleviate pain. This distinction, of course, proved to be a tragically false comfort. By the turn of the century, however, a growing body of evidence and clinical experience began to paint a clearer, more alarming picture. Doctors were seeing patients whose lives had been utterly destroyed by prolonged use of morphine and cocaine. They observed the escalating doses required, the devastating physical and psychological withdrawal symptoms, and the utter inability of patients to stop despite their best intentions. Slowly, reluctantly, the medical profession began to grapple with the realization that their powerful tools, once seen as unqualified blessings, also held the power to destroy. Legislative efforts began to emerge, first in America with the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914, which regulated and taxed the production and distribution of opiates and coca products. Similar, albeit slower, movements occurred in Europe. These acts were a tacit admission that the medical profession, left to its own devices, had inadvertently created a crisis. Doctors were suddenly faced with stricter guidelines, forced to defend their prescriptions, and began to recognize the ethical quagmire they had stumbled into. But for many aristocrats of the Belle Époque, this realization came too late. Their dependence was already deeply entrenched. Lives had been irrevocably altered. Fortunes squandered, health ruined, families torn apart, all initially sanctioned by the very people they trusted most, their doctors. The very definition of medicine in this era was shifting, from a largely unregulated, often experimental practice to a more scientifically grounded and eventually, more ethically constrained profession. You stand now at a crucial vantage point, observing this complex tapestry of health, wealth, and unintended consequences. The image of the kindly doctor, syringe in hand, offering relief, now carries a darker resonance. He was not malicious, indeed his intentions were often noble. He was a product of his time, constrained by the limits of scientific knowledge, pressured by societal expectations, and armed with powerful substances whose true nature was only dimly perceived. Yet, his actions and those of his peers inadvertently laid the groundwork for countless personal tragedies, turning promised cures into unforeseen curses. The story of the Belle Époque's addicted aristocrats is not simply a tale of moral failing or personal weakness. It is a stark reminder of the intricate web of societal factors that contribute to addiction, a web in which even the most respected figures, acting with the best of intentions, can become unwitting enablers. The Golden Age, in its relentless pursuit of pleasure and the eradication of pain, found itself caught in a tragic paradox, where the very solutions offered by modern medicine sometimes led to its most profound and lasting suffering. As you step away from these shadowed consultation rooms and opulent bedrooms, you carry with you a deeper appreciation for the nuanced relationship between healing and harm. The Belle Époque's doctors, in their earnest efforts to alleviate suffering, became, for a generation of the privileged, agents of a slow, insidious descent. Their deadly hand was not one of malice, but of ignorance, a chilling testament to the unpredictable consequences that can arise when scientific advancement outpaces ethical understanding and true pharmacological insight. The pain lingered, long after the euphoria faded, a silent, enduring legacy beneath the dazzling facade. You feel the chill of the morning air as you step out from the hidden world of private affliction, leaving behind the hushed consultation rooms and the carefully drawn curtains of aristocratic bedrooms. You have glimpsed the insidious descent, the quiet tragedy unfolding behind closed doors, fueled by well-meaning physicians and the desperate craving for escape. The pain, you know, has lingered long after the euphoria faded, a silent, enduring legacy beneath the dazzling facade. But the Belle Époque, in all its glittering excess, was a society built upon appearances, a fragile edifice where a single crack could bring down an entire life. What happens when the private sorrow spills into the public arena? What happens when the whispers begin? You find yourself drawn, almost irresistibly, into the vibrant heart of this era's social universe, the salon. Imagine the grand entrance, the polished parquet floors reflecting the soft glow of gaslight, the murmur of dozens of voices rising and falling like a complex symphony. Here, beneath crystal chandeliers and amidst velvet drapes, the very fabric of society was woven and unraveled. This was not merely a place for polite conversation. It was the ultimate stage, a court of public opinion where reputations were minted and mercilessly destroyed. Every gesture, every word, every nuance of dress and demeanor was observed, judged, and dissected with an unforgiving eye. You circulate through the crowded rooms, a silent observer. The air is thick with the scent of expensive perfumes, tobacco smoke, and the faint, sweet aroma of champagne. Laughter rings out, sharp and brittle, punctuated by the clink of glasses and the rustle of silk. Here, alliances were forged, artistic careers launched, political maneuvers subtly enacted. But beneath the dazzling surface, a more insidious drama played out, one that centered on the fragile commodity of reputation. You might notice her first, a countess whose eyes, once sparkling with wit, now possess a distant, unfocused quality, often seeming to stare through you rather than at you. Or perhaps it is the baron, usually so animated, who seems to list slightly, his conversation veering erratically between flashes of brilliance and moments of profound, unsettling lethargy, often repeating himself or losing his train of thought mid-sentence. These are the subtle cues, the first tremors of an earthquake that could devastate a life. In a society where discretion was paramount, and the word addiction was almost never uttered aloud, its presence was nonetheless felt, a spectral guest in every opulent gathering, its shadow lengthening with each passing week. The code of silence was absolute. To be known as an opium fiend, or a cocaine user, was to invite social death. For a woman, it was worse. It meant ruin, rendering her unmarriageable, uninvited, and utterly ostracized from the very circles she inhabited. For a man, while perhaps slightly more tolerated in bohemian artistic circles, it nonetheless spelled the definitive end of any serious political ambition or respectable business endeavor. The pressure to maintain the illusion of perfect health, perfect sobriety, and perfect composure was immense, a constant, exhausting performance under the most scrutinizing of gazes. You watch as a young debutante, radiant in a gown of cream lace, suddenly excuses herself, a faint tremor in her hands. You remember the rumors you overheard, whispered behind gloved hands. Poor Mademoiselle Dubois, her nerves are quite shattered. She takes a special tonic, you know, for her delicate constitution. The special tonic, you understand, is the polite euphemism, the veiled language used to hint at something far more sinister than mere hysteria. Perhaps it is a powerful laudanum preparation, prescribed by a sympathetic but misguided doctor for her hysteria, or melancholy. Now, her frequent need to retire to a private room, her sudden changes in mood from effusive charm to quiet despondency, her sometimes glassy-eyed stare, and the faint, almost imperceptible tremor in her hands when she lifts a teacup, are all becoming too obvious to ignore. The double standard, you note, was painfully evident. While a man might suffer professional ruin and social marginalization, a woman faced complete social annihilation. Her perceived moral failing, exacerbated by her addiction, was seen as a fundamental flaw, tainting her femininity and rendering her unsuitable for the roles society prescribed for her as a wife, mother, or hostess. The fragility of female reputation in this era meant that even the slightest hint of impropriety, let alone outright addiction, was enough to shatter her world irrevocably. You understand now the chilling irony of this era. A society that championed individual liberty, artistic expression, and the pursuit of sensation simultaneously enforced an incredibly rigid code of public conduct. The private indulgence, celebrated in its nascent stages as a sign of refinement or bohemianism, became a public shame when it crossed an invisible line, transforming from a sophisticated vice into a grotesque affliction. The very salons that offered the stage for intellectual discourse and refined entertainment also served as the crucibles where social reputations were forged and ruthlessly broken, often in the same evening. The sound of music, a delicate waltz, drifts towards you from the ballroom. Couples spin gracefully, their faces alight with a carefree joy. But you have seen behind the masks, beyond the dazzling lights. You have seen the fear in the eyes of those desperately trying to keep their secret, the subtle tremble of a hand, the forced smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. The opulence of the Belle Époque concealed a deep vein of vulnerability, a profound insecurity about personal failing in a society that demanded perfection, yet offered so many pathways to hidden excess. The weight of this societal judgment was immense. It forced addiction further into the shadows, making it even harder for individuals to seek genuine help, lest they expose themselves to unforgiving public censure. The fear of scandal became a more potent deterrent than the fear of the drug itself, trapping many in a cycle of dependency and deceit. It created a world where people lived a double life, outwardly conforming to the demands of elegance and propriety, while inwardly battling a consuming craving that threatened to unravel their very existence, moment by agonizing moment. The casual cruelty of social judgment was particularly devastating because it was often unspoken, implied rather than stated. You would not hear outright condemnation in the refined circles of the Belle Époque. Instead, you would feel the chill, the subtle exclusion, the growing silence that spoke louder than any accusation. It was a slow, agonizing process of being ghosted, erased from the social fabric, one invitation, one averted glance, one whispered conversation at a time. The whispers themselves were often more damaging than outright accusations, because they were harder to refute, insidious and pervasive, leaving a trail of doubt that could never truly be erased. And what of the families? The shame and desperation of parents trying to shield their child, or spouses trying to protect their partner, must have been immense. They became complicit in the deception, investing significant emotional and financial resources into maintaining the illusion. Hiring private nurses, arranging for covert medical interventions, arranging for extended holidays, or cures, at distant sanatoriums under false pretenses, all to preserve the family name, to keep the scandal from shattering their own standing. The addiction became a family secret, a corrosive force that ate away at the bonds of trust and honesty within the most intimate relationships, creating an atmosphere of shared anxiety and elaborate lies that often proved as destructive as the addiction itself. The cost was astronomical, not only in terms of reputation and social standing, but in human suffering. The isolated addict, the distraught family, the silent judgment of a society that inadvertently fostered the problem while mercilessly punishing its manifestation. You understand that the glittering facade of the Belle Époque, so carefully constructed, hid not only pleasure but profound pain, and a societal hypocrisy that demanded absolute perfection while simultaneously indulging in intoxicating excess. You walk away from the salons, the echoes of their laughter and their judgments still resonating in your mind. The air, once thick with perfume, now feels heavy with unspoken anxieties and shattered dreams. The Belle Époque's dance with addiction was a dangerous one, and while the early steps were intoxicating, the final movements were often marked by a crushing fall from grace, a public shaming that overshadowed any private agony. The memory of the lost reputations, the ruined lives, serves as a stark reminder that in a world obsessed with appearances, the greatest poison was often not the drug itself, but the unforgiving gaze of society. This brings us to a crucial juncture. What happens when the whispers become too loud to ignore, when the private struggle demands a public solution, or at least a public explanation? The strategies for concealment could only last so long. Eventually, the facade would crack irrevocably and the questions would begin. What is to be done? The answer, in many cases, would lead to institutions designed for cure, yet often shrouded in their own controversies and moral ambiguities, offering a new, equally complex chapter in the story of these addicted aristocrats. The story of the addicted aristocrats, therefore, is not simply one of personal failing or medical ignorance. It is deeply intertwined with the social strictures of their time, a testament to the immense power of reputation and the devastating impact of its loss. You have walked through the salons and seen the silent judgments, the averted gazes, the subtle shifts in conversation that signaled the beginning of the end for many. The pursuit of pleasure, when it crossed the line into dependency, transformed from a sophisticated indulgence into a shameful secret, forcing its victims into a desperate battle not only against the drug itself, but against the unforgiving scrutiny of their peers, a scrutiny that peeled away their dignity, layer by painful layer. The elegance and charm of the Belle Époque, its very essence, relied on a polished surface, a veneer of perfection. When that veneer cracked, revealing the raw, ugly truth of addiction, the consequences were immediate and severe. It was a mirror held up to a society that preferred illusion over reality, a society that valued appearance above all else. And in that reflection, many found their lives irrevocably broken, cast out from the very circles they had so carefully cultivated. You can almost hear the rustle of silk as a hostess sighs, crossing a name off her guest list. The polite note declining an invitation, a thinly veiled dismissal. The sudden, inexplicable illness that requires a long recuperative trip to the countryside, or indeed to a specialized clinic far from the prying eyes of Paris. These were the quiet executions of social standing, the subtle but devastating blows that marked the end of a public life, replacing vibrancy with solitude and hope with despair. The stigma was a heavy cloak, smothering any hope of open discussion or compassionate understanding. Instead, it bred secrecy, deceit, and further isolation. The aristocratic addict, once surrounded by a vibrant social circle, found themselves increasingly alone, their world shrinking, their secrets multiplying. The very notion of seeking help openly was almost unthinkable, as it would confirm the very rumors they so desperately sought to quash, sealing their fate. Imagine the psychological torment. To be constantly on guard, to meticulously plan every dose, every interaction, to invent increasingly elaborate excuses for one's physical and mental state, to live in perpetual fear of exposure. To watch, day by day, as the respect and admiration of one's peers slowly eroded, replaced by suspicion, pity, or outright disdain. The salon, once a sanctuary of wit and elegance, became a battlefield where one fought not only against the drug's grip, but against the relentless erosion of one's very identity, until there was little left but the craving and the fear. The gilded cages of aristocracy, monsieur, madame, are often disguised as grand salons, opulent boudoirs, and exclusive clubs where the champagne flows as freely as the gossip. But beyond the plush velvet and the shimmering crystal, another world unfolds, one equally intoxicating yet far more perilous. It is the world of the artist, a realm where the pursuit of beauty, the yearning for genius, often led down shadowed paths, paved not with gold, but with the insidious promise of altered perception. You may have seen them, these figures, both revered and reviled, flitting through your social circles or haunting the smoky corners of the very same cafés where you sought your own solace. They were the poets with their haunted eyes, the painters with their feverish hands, the composers whose melodies soared, yet whose lives often plummeted into discordant chaos. They lived, or so it was often believed, on a different plane, one accessible only through heightened sensation, through a deliberate blurring of the lines between reality and dream. In this Belle Époque, a curious narrative took root, one that intertwined artistic brilliance with a certain elegant madness. The tortured genius, the artist driven to extremes by their muse, became almost a romantic ideal. This perception, fostered by a society eager for spectacle and originality, inadvertently opened the door for self-destructive tendencies to be reinterpreted as necessary sacrifices on the altar of art. And within this romanticism, substances found their insidious entry, whispered to be the keys to unlock deeper wells of inspiration, to sharpen the dull edges of the mundane, to strip away the veils of convention and reveal the raw, pulsating heart of existence. Consider the ritual of absinthe, the infamous green fairy. You have undoubtedly encountered her, perhaps at your own table, or certainly in the bustling brasseries where artists and intellectuals converged. You watch as the server places the ornate, fluted glass before you, a measure of the potent emerald liquid shimmering at its base. Then the slotted spoon balanced delicately across the rim, and upon it a sugar cube waiting. The slow drip of icy water, bead by bead, through the sugar, dissolving it, clouding the absinthe into a milky, opalescent swirl, a process known as dilution. The air fills with its distinct aroma, an anise-laced invitation to another state of being, a scent that still evokes the bohemian dream, laced with a hint of danger. It was not merely a drink, you understand. It was an experience, a deliberate performance, a gateway. For some, it was a social lubricant, a sophisticated indulgence enjoyed during lively debates. For many artists, however, it was a sacred elixir, believed to open the doors of perception, to free the mind from its earthly shackles, to allow the brush or the pen to dance with uninhibited fervor. They spoke of its ability to ignite new colors, to reveal hidden patterns in the mundane, to whisper secrets of the subconscious, transforming the ordinary world into a vibrant tapestry of possibility. You might have witnessed the transformation in a fellow diner, an artist perhaps, whose conversation grew more animated, whose gestures became more expansive, whose eyes, initially clouded with the fatigue of creation, now sparkled with a manic intensity. They would sketch furiously on café napkins, their charcoal flying across the paper, or recite impromptu poetry, their voices ringing with a fierce, ephemeral brilliance. Their minds seemed suddenly alight, capable of piercing insight and boundless invention. The myth of absinthe was that it sharpened the senses, heightened perception, and stripped away the trivial, leaving only the essential, the naked truth of an artistic vision. It was a potent promise in an era obsessed with breaking new ground. But you, monsieur, madame, living with your own quiet erosion, you know the true cost of such fleeting brilliance. You see past the initial sparkle, past the captivating performance. You understand that the green fairy, like all such enticements, extracted a terrible toll. The initial clarity would inevitably give way to confusion, the heightened senses to paranoia, the vibrant colors to a dull, aching gray. The morning after was not merely a hangover, it was a deeper descent, a further entanglement in the insidious web of dependency. The artist who once soared on its wings would find themselves trapped, their creativity shackled by the very substance that once seemed to liberate it. The artists of this era, seeking to break free from academic strictures, to portray the raw, unfiltered truth of modern life, often found themselves caught in another kind of cage, one built brick by brick from their own desperate pursuit of inspiration. They sought the sublime but often found the abyss. The tremulous hand that once rendered delicate details now shook with a desperate craving. The keen eye that discerned every nuance of light and shadow now saw only distorted specters, the world losing its sharp focus, blurring into a painful, indistinct haze. And absinthe was far from the only siren. Opium, in its various forms, held an equally potent, if more discreet, sway. Laudanum, a tincture of opium, was widely available, sold in pharmacies for everything from soothing teething babies to calming frayed nerves. For artists, it offered a different kind of escape. Where absinthe was a public, boisterous muse, opium was a private, introspective one. It promised not heightened animation but profound calm, a luxurious retreat into dreamlike states where the boundaries of reality softened and imagination could roam unfettered, conjuring visions of unparalleled beauty or terrifying grandeur. You might have heard whispers of a poet, reclined in a darkened room, a porcelain pipe sending sweet, acrid smoke curling towards the ceiling, his mind adrift in a world of his own making, far removed from the clamor of the city. Or perhaps a novelist, penning feverish prose under the influence of laudanum, believing themselves to be channeling the very essence of human experience, when in truth, they were merely adrift in a self-induced stupor, their words disconnected from genuine feeling. The creative output during these periods could be prodigious, fantastical, even groundbreaking in its audacity. But at what expense to the artist's soul, to their very grip on reality? The insidious nature of opium was its deceptive gentleness. It did not provoke the same public spectacle as absinthe. Its effects were more internal, more profoundly debilitating in the long run. It dulled not only physical pain but also emotional distress, ambition, responsibility, and the very will to engage with the world outside the self. The retreat into one's own mind, initially perceived as a source of deep inspiration, became a suffocating prison, a fog from which escape grew increasingly difficult, if not impossible. The artist, once a vibrant presence, might become a wraith, fading from public view, consumed by their private torment. Then there were the newer fascinations, the substances emerging from the burgeoning world of chemistry and medicine, initially hailed as scientific marvels. Morphine, a purified alkaloid of opium, offered even greater potency and was initially hailed as a miracle painkiller, a boon to modern medicine. Cocaine, initially marketed as a tonic, a cure for myriad ailments, quickly found its way into artistic circles as a potent stimulant, a means to overcome fatigue and maintain a relentless, almost inhuman pace of work. Ether, with its quick, disorienting rush, was another occasional indulgence, offering a brief, terrifying glimpse beyond the veil of consciousness. These were not just recreational choices, they were often seen as tools, instruments in the relentless quest for originality and insight. The pressure to create, to innovate, to stand apart in the crowded, competitive artistic landscape of the Belle Époque was immense. Artists, grappling with self-doubt, financial precariousness, the relentless demands of their patrons and critics, and often, an underlying current of personal despair or mental affliction, turned to these chemical crutches, believing them to be indispensable allies in their struggle to produce, to be seen, to be remembered. You might have witnessed the frantic pace of a sculptor, fueled by cocaine, working through the night, his hands a blur over clay or marble, his eyes wide and unblinking, convinced he was on the verge of capturing an elusive, perfect form. Or a musician, relying on morphine to soothe the anxieties of performance and creation, only to find themselves increasingly reliant on its numbing embrace, their music losing its vibrancy, their soul its essential connection to the very emotions it sought to express. The cycle was cruelly predictable. The initial surge of inspiration, the feeling of heightened capability, would be followed by a crashing descent into despair, exhaustion, and a deeper, more desperate craving. The very act of creation, once a source of pure passion, became inextricably linked to the substance. The artist, in a cruel twist of fate, would convince themselves that they could not produce without it, that their very muse had become dependent on its poisoned well. Their identity, their sense of purpose, their entire artistic being, became intertwined with the next dose, the next glass. The unique vision they had once sought to express became distorted, fractured, a flickering shadow of its former glory, utterly overshadowed by the all-consuming desperate need. You would see their work grow erratic, brilliant flashes interspersed with periods of profound stagnation, or perhaps a gradual decline into repetitive, less inspired forms. The vibrant intensity of their earlier pieces might give way to a muddy palette, a hesitant line, a hollow echo of past genius. Think of the art itself, Monsieur, Madame. The haunting loneliness in the café scenes, the alienated figures gazing into space, the vibrant colors that sometimes feel almost too intense, too feverish. These were not merely detached observations of society, they were often profound reflections of the artist's own internal landscapes, shaped and warped by their chemical companions. Degas' L'Absinthe, for example, captures not the glamour, but the profound desolation of addiction. You see the woman, slumped over a table, her gaze vacant, her companion equally lost in his own reverie, the green liquid a silent, complicit witness to their quiet ruin. It is a stark, unromanticized portrayal of a shared isolation, a tableau of lives quietly unraveling in plain sight, yet often ignored. The art became a stark mirror, reflecting the grim truths that the glittering Belle Époque preferred to keep hidden. The aristocratic patrons, the very people who commissioned these works and mingled with these artists, often turned a blind eye, or perhaps in their own parallel indulgences, found a perverse kinship. They admired the bohemian spirit, the raw talent, the daring rebellion against convention. They reveled in the stories of artistic eccentricity, rarely questioning the dark forces that truly fueled it. So long as the masterpieces kept coming, so long as the salons were entertained and the cultural landscape remained vibrant, the hidden struggles remained conveniently out of sight, discreetly swept under the plush carpets of polite society. The same privilege that afforded them access to a life of leisure also afforded them access to the same substances, fostering a tacit understanding, a shared secret among the elite and the artists they admired. Yet, for all the talk of enhanced creativity, the long-term consequences were devastating. The delicate machinery of the human body and mind simply could not sustain such assaults indefinitely. Brains that once teemed with vibrant ideas grew sluggish and confused. Hands that once wielded brushes with precision now trembled uncontrollably, rendering impossible the meticulous work they once perfected. Health deteriorated rapidly, finances collapsed under the weight of habit, and reputations, once soaring, crumbled into cautionary tales. The romantic ideal of the tortured genius often ended not in posthumous glory, but in a lonely, painful decline, a slow descent into obscurity or an early, often tragic, death. You, monsieur, madame, understand this trajectory intimately. You understand the seductive whisper of temporary escape, the fleeting illusion of control, the slow, relentless erosion of your own life, your own fortune, by the very comforts you sought. The artists of the Belle Époque, in their desperate pursuit of a higher truth, or perhaps simply an escape from the crushing weight of expectation, often mirrored your own journey. Their canvases, their poems, their symphonies may have left an indelible mark on the world, but their lives, like yours, became elegant ruins, testaments to the high price of self-deception and the cruel allure of the poisoned muse. The beautiful facade of artistic genius, much like the glittering exterior of your own aristocratic world, concealed a profound vulnerability. Beneath the dazzling lights of Parisian salons and the bohemian allure of Montmartre studios, lay a universal human fragility, one that sought solace, inspiration, or oblivion in the readily available palliatives of the age. The Belle Époque celebrated innovation and beauty, but it also silently nurtured its own slow-burning infernos, turning potential into ashes, brilliance into a fading ember, leaving behind a legacy as complex and contradictory as the era itself. You stand amidst the lingering echoes of their struggles, sensing the shared vulnerability, the unspoken understanding that transcends social strata and artistic renown. The artist, like the aristocrat, was not immune to the siren song of self-destruction. In fact, for many, the very essence of their creative spirit became entangled with the agents of their undoing, leaving behind masterpieces born of profound suffering, brilliance fueled by a slow suicide. And you, monsieur, madame, recognize in their tragic beauty a reflection of your own quiet, dignified surrender to the poisons of privilege. Your own path, though perhaps less public, is no less marked by the shadows of self-inflicted erosion. This segment concludes not with a resolution, but with a deeper understanding of the pervasive nature of addiction across the Belle Époque's varied landscapes. It underscores that the elegant ruin is not confined to one social class, but is a human condition, magnified and made more poignant by the very brilliance it often accompanies. The art remains a testament to what was, but the human cost, the silent suffering lingers in the hushed corners of history, a permanent stain on the otherwise dazzling tapestry of the Belle Époque. The pursuit of the sublime, you realize, often led directly to the profound depths of the human shadow. And in that shadow, amidst the glittering dust of forgotten ambitions, you find yourself, an echo of so many others, brilliant and broken, a masterpiece of quiet despair. The stage is set for the next act, but the lingering scent of absinthe and opium, of desperation and genius, still hangs heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the price paid for living on the very edge of a golden age. The gaslight hisses softly, illuminating the mist that curls around your ankles as you walk, a spectral presence in the Parisian night. The laughter and music from the grand salons seem to recede, replaced by a colder, more insistent quiet. You are no longer merely observing the past. You are feeling the chill of its hidden depths, sensing the profound, widespread, and often deeply secret suffering that lingered beneath the glittering surface of the Belle Époque. It is here, in this shadowed realm, that you confront the true cost of unbridled luxury and the crushing weight of societal expectation, the silent epidemic of addiction that gripped the European aristocracy. Imagine, if you will, the opulent drawing rooms, the hushed boudoirs, the gilded cages where lives of immense privilege unfolded. For many within the upper echelons of society, the Belle Époque was a gilded cage indeed, offering boundless leisure but often little genuine purpose. The inherited wealth that freed them from labor also frequently condemned them to a peculiar ennui, a profound boredom that gnawed at the soul. Time, stretched out in an endless panorama of social engagements and superficial pleasures, often became an enemy. What does one do when every material desire is met, when the day is filled with little more than dressing, dining, and dazzling? For some, the answer lay in a dangerous dance with altered states of consciousness, a quest for stimulation or oblivion that spiraled into dependence. It began subtly, perhaps, with a doctor's prescription, a fashionable social experiment, or the lure of the exotic. The aristocracy, with its vast resources and its unique position, found itself uniquely vulnerable. They had the means to acquire the rarest substances from distant lands, the social standing to experiment beyond the reach of common scrutiny, and the leisure to dedicate themselves to habits that would ruin others. Consider the allure of opium. You might picture a smoky, dimly lit den in a far-off land, but during the Belle Époque, opium dens were not confined to the East. They existed, discreetly yet undeniably, in the heart of Paris, London, and other European capitals, catering to an elite clientele. For a bored countess, a disillusioned poet, or a world-weary diplomat, the heavy, sweet scent of opium could offer a momentary escape from the constraints of their elevated lives. You would see them, perhaps, reclining on silken cushions, their faces softened by the drug, their worries temporarily dissolved in a haze of pipe smoke. It was seen by some as an intellectual pursuit, a sophisticated vice, or a pathway to artistic inspiration, far removed from the crude drunkenness of the lower classes. Yet the opium pipe was merely one gateway. More pervasive, more insidious, was the medical establishment's role in fostering widespread addiction. The 19th century was a time of groundbreaking medical advances, but also profound ignorance regarding the addictive properties of many powerful drugs. Morphine, a purified alkaloid of opium, was hailed as a miracle. It was a potent painkiller, a sedative for nervous ailments, a panacea for all manner of physical and psychological distress. And it was prescribed with astonishing frequency, often with little caution, particularly to women suffering from nerves, hysteria, or the chronic pains that were then poorly understood. Imagine a sophisticated Parisian lady, confined by corsets and social etiquette, perhaps suffering from chronic migraines or the vague melancholia common to her class. Her doctor, a respected figure, would offer her a solution, a small vial of clear liquid, a hypodermic needle. The initial relief was profound. The pain vanished. The anxiety quieted. The world, for a brief time, became bearable, even beautiful. You can almost feel the prick of the needle, the warmth spreading through her veins, the blissful descent into calm. But that calm, you realize, was a deceptive siren song. The body craved more, the mind demanded its return, and soon what began as a cure became a relentless torment. This morphinomany, as it was called, became a secret shame for countless aristocratic women, hidden behind the closed doors of their palatial homes, their lives slowly unraveling in elegant misery. Cocaine too found its way into the gilded circles. Initially extracted from the coca leaf and lauded by figures like Sigmund Freud for its stimulating and mood-elevating properties, it quickly became a fashionable tonic. You might have found it offered in small, elegant vials, or even mixed into popular beverages and elixirs. For the socialite needing a burst of energy to navigate a grueling season of balls and soirees, for the artist seeking heightened creativity, or for the intellectual yearning for sharper wit, cocaine promised an edge. It offered an illusion of boundless vitality, a temporary escape from fatigue and self-doubt. You can picture a group of impeccably dressed men and women, whispering conspiratorially, perhaps excusing themselves from a crowded salon for a private moment with their stimulant. The immediate high was exhilarating, but the crash, the paranoia, and the insatiable craving that followed were a heavy price, paid in solitude and despair. Then there was the notorious green fairy absinthe. More than just a drink, it was a ritual, a cultural phenomenon deeply intertwined with the bohemian and artistic communities, but also embraced by those in higher society seeking to escape conventionality. You can almost hear the drip of water slowly dissolving the sugar cube over the slotted spoon, transforming the clear green liquor into a milky, opalescent cloud. The heady, complex aroma of anise, fennel, and wormwood fills your senses. Absinthe, with its high alcohol content and rumored psychotropic effects, was believed to unlock creativity, to transport one to another realm. It was consumed with a certain defiant panache, a symbol of modernity and artistic freedom. But beneath the romantic veneer, absinthe addiction could lead to profound neurological damage, hallucinations, and a slow, inexorable decline into what was known as absinthism. And let us not forget laudanum. This simple tincture of opium, mixed with alcohol, was widely available and incredibly cheap. It was the common person's opiate, but it was also a favored form of self-medication for the upper classes, particularly when discretion was paramount. A few drops could quell a cough, soothe a child, or more darkly, quiet the unbearable anxieties of an aristocratic existence. You might imagine it kept in an ornate bottle on a bedside table, a seemingly innocuous remedy for any ailment, silently sowing the seeds of dependency. The tragedy of these addicted aristocrats was multi-layered. They were trapped by their privilege as much as by their addiction. Their social standing demanded a facade of impeccable health, unwavering self-control, and unwavering moral rectitude. To admit to an addiction, particularly to a drug that carried social stigma, was to risk utter ruin, ostracism, financial devastation, and the complete destruction of their carefully constructed public image. The pressure to maintain appearances was immense, forcing their suffering deep into the shadows. So, you see them, these figures of the Belle Époque, in your mind's eye. The aging countess, whose once sparkling eyes now hold a haunted, distant look, her once vibrant skin pale and drawn beneath layers of expensive cosmetics. She might still host the most magnificent soirees, her jewels still glitter, but behind the closed doors of her private chambers she trembles, awaiting her next dose of morphine, a prisoner in her own opulent home. You sense the frantic energy she expends on concealing her secret, the careful timing of her doses, the elaborate excuses for her frequent headaches or fatigue. There is also the brilliant young heir, expected to carry on the family name and fortune. Perhaps he discovered opium through a curious dalliance in a bohemian salon, or cocaine through a fast-living crowd. Initially, it heightened his senses, made him feel invincible, the life of every party. But now, you observe the tremor in his hands, the widening pupils, the erratic moods, the increasingly desperate need to escape the crushing expectations of his inheritance. His once sharp mind is dulled, his ambition eroded, replaced by a singular, consuming obsession. His family, desperate to protect their reputation, might send him away to discreet sanatoriums, euphemistically described as places for nervous exhaustion, hoping to cure a disease they barely understood, often without success. Consider the prolific writer, whose words once danced with wit and insight. He started with laudanum to calm his restless mind, to silence the clamor of inspiration and frustration. Now his creative wellspring has dried up, replaced by a fog of dependency. He struggles to form coherent sentences, his genius dissolving into a haze. His publishers grow impatient, his patrons drift away, and he becomes a recluse, his talent consumed by the very thing he believed would enhance it. You can almost smell the stale air in his study, filled with forgotten manuscripts and the bitter scent of his chosen poison. The paradox of their suffering was that it unfolded amidst unparalleled beauty and advancement. While scientists pursued cures for diseases, while artists painted masterpieces, and while engineers built wonders, a quiet, internal destruction was ravaging the lives of some of society's most privileged. The very progress that brought new medicines also brought new forms of dependency. The freedom from hardship paradoxically created a new kind of prison. The public, for the most part, remained oblivious or chose to ignore the truth. Addiction was a topic spoken of in hushed tones, if at all, a mark of moral failure rather than a disease. The elegant dances continued, the grand opera houses remained full, and the fashionable promenades bustled with life. But for those caught in the grip of their secret torment, the world outside became a distant, mocking spectacle. Their inner lives were a desperate struggle, a constant negotiation with craving and withdrawal, a relentless cycle of fleeting relief followed by profound despair. The Belle Époque, in its glittering arrogance, often failed to see the human cost of its own excesses. The pursuit of pleasure, the cult of aesthetics, and the embrace of novelty sometimes overshadowed the very real dangers lurking beneath the surface. The belief that one could control these potent substances, that they were tools for enhancement rather than masters of one's fate, proved to be a tragic delusion for many. As the Belle Époque drew to a close, and the shadows of war began to gather, attitudes towards narcotics slowly began to shift. The scale of the problem became undeniable. Medical understanding gradually improved and public awareness grew. But for generations of aristocrats, the damage was already done. Their lives, once full of promise and privilege, were often reduced to quiet, elegant ruins, their stories hidden, their suffering unacknowledged by the wider world they were expected to enchant. You now stand here on this imagined street, a witness to more than just the surface glamour of an era. You see the ghosts of its hidden sorrows, the echoes of its whispered desperation. The Belle Époque was indeed an age of breathtaking beauty, of dazzling innovation, and of profound social change. But it was also tragically an age of widespread and often deeply secret suffering, where the irresistible allure of altered states led far too many down treacherous paths from which there was no easy, or even possible return. The true price of that golden age, you realize with a shiver, was often paid in crushing solitude, in the relentless torment of addiction, and in the quiet, desperate pursuit of oblivion, far removed from the admiring, unsuspecting gaze of society. These are the poignant, profound understandings you carry with you now, realizing that even in the most beautiful of times, human vulnerability finds its most cunning and devastating expressions. The elegant ruin of these addicted aristocrats serves as a stark reminder that even the most privileged lives can be undone by the silent grip of hidden torment, leaving behind only the haunting echoes of their indulgence.